Hi all, mindset hack for today from Amsterdam. I feel like I'm a little bit, not on repeat, but I talked about the news before. And it was about what news consumption does to the fear center in our brain. You know, that it lights it up because we're bad weather animals. And to not consume news early in the morning or after 3 p.m. That was a mindset hack. That was a real thing because there was so much worry and fear in the world. This mindset hack is also about the news in essence. And I would like to discuss the topic of journalism. In fact, not negative journalism, but positive journalism. And positive journalism is a field of study. It's a field of study in positive psychologists. And they want to move towards better reporting. And, I don't want to go into what news channel, which country's news channel. I want to stay away from that. But the problem is that, okay, first of all, positive journalism isn't about, articles about cute fluffy dogs with pictures of them. No, that's not what it is about. It is also not just about sharing good news too, which I think is really important. But it is about how you show the bad news as well. So not showing positive news leads us to believe that the world is a really awful place. And that it is now, given the big words that the journalists use, now worse than ever, right? The world is worse than ever. Where when you look at statistics worldwide on the number of people that die of hunger, when you look at the statistics on teenage pregnancy worldwide, people's basic access to healthcare or education, wars, either civil or international or world wars, we're actually, in a really weird way, we're actually doing better than ever. But we just hardly see any reporting about that, so that's one. So it would be fair that the feel-good stories aren't, those are another thing. The feel-good story about the inspirational entrepreneur puts a really positive brain impulse in the brain. But I'm talking really about world news that doesn't put a threat on our lives, but actually could give us a sense of, oh, that's a major feat, that HIV, at least in the Western world, has medication for the average person to not develop AIDS in the end, and actually they can have a really long life, and that's a positive news, or a country that pulls itself from a third world status to second world status, that is positive news. Those types of things, and those are hardly ever reported on, I covered it in a previous mindset hack more about when are people more willing to donate. Well, that relates a little bit more to the story that I'm about to tell as well, is people are more willing to donate because there is a part of the brain that lights up, that wants us, that notices suffering, and through that we want to be altruistic. Yeah? So when we see someone suffer, we can have empathy, but we can also have be in a place where we want to understand someone's suffering. That's compassion. But also can be in a situation where we want to ease someone's suffering. That's altruism, right? And we're more likely to be altruistic if, when they did a study where they would just tell a story about a poor girl in some country in Africa, versus the story of the poor girl, but with statistics, versus just the statistics. And they found the least amount of donations came for just the statistics of the whole African continent, let's say. The second amount that was indeed statistic with the story of the one little girl. And then the most donations came for the story of the one little girl. So there's something about seeing one person suffer. And as a result of that, our brain activates. Okay? So when you think about it, our brain can negatively activate and it can also positively activate. I mean, it will activate one way or another and gets us to either fight, or freeze, or experience positive emotions or compassion or understanding. It's going to be creating an emotion inside our body that gives us a reaction, right? So now you can pair that also with the sense that our brain is wired to notice danger and negativity. That includes things that are new to us and we don't know. So when you think about that in the animal kingdom, I'll give you a personal example. One of my training destinations is Bali. I frequently come across the concept of a spider of which I don't know what it is. So you stand there and I assume that this spider is a negative because it looks like something I have never seen before, and therefore my assumption is this thing is dangerous and it needs to leave, right? I just came from the desert, 2.5 months in the desert. I saw here and there also animals, snake-looking like animals that I don't know if they're good or bad. So I just assume bad, right? So there were spiders, I don't know, good or bad. I assume bad. And it turned out there were actually white widows, and the snakes are poisonous there. They're rattlesnakes. So, the brain activates by what we don't know. And it activates negatively. And in a sense, if something is really dangerous, it's a really positive thing. The problem is that our brain can also, by biology, activate when we see people, in essence, that, if you want to go back to our ancestors, from other tribes. When we see people that don't look like us and we're not used to seeing that, then we can perceive that as danger. Or in essence, we perceive that as having a bias towards the negative. Now, we're not living in a completely isolated world, luckily. We do see people from other races around us or on TV. Which leads me back to the news. It has scientifically been proven. Like I said, the brain will react. So let's say you grew up and people had, 1 out of 3 colors in your neighborhood and one wasn't black, right? That's a possibility. And it's very, and so, well, first of all, scientific research has shown that we have a really hard time distinguishing one person from another of a race that we haven't seen very much, right? So for a white person who hasn't spent much time with in a black community, they have a hard time telling black people apart. But the opposite is true as well. So if a black person hasn't spent a lot of time in a white community, cannot tell the difference. Like for instance, my family is Asian on my mom's side, and I could be walking with my mom or my aunt somewhere in the city, and someone will stop us and will call my mom or my aunt by a name of some other family member of mine, or even someone that I don't even know. That's because Dutch people sometimes have a hard time distinguishing people apart from each other, where, in my opinion, we don't look anything like each other. My mom doesn't look at all like my aunt. I don't even know. I'm even surprised how they manage to stay within the same family, but, there are not a lot of Indonesian people walking around where they live. So maybe that's it. I don't know. But you know what I'm saying, right? And so you could be totally not racist, but just having a really hard time to tell people apart from each other. And that is a biological thing that is universal between groups. Okay? So that's one thing I'd like to say. But but here's the real problem. Here is the real problem. That we think we can tell people apart, but where we actually can't, that's a problem, right? Because that leads to false convictions. If we think that we're a good eyewitness, we're actually not. Scientific evidence has shown that we're extremely bad at recalling events and faces. We're extremely bad at it, and conversations, but we think we're really good at it. So that's a problem. Our perceptions is really off. But then also the news has been proven to really create a bias in our brains as to how they depict people of the other group, right? So in essence, if you're constantly bombarded, so you in your real world, you're not having a lot of people from a certain ethnic group around. Let's say you're white and you're not spending a lot of time with black people in general. You may have just have the one token black friend or something like that. And you just, it's not your fault. It's that you don't spend a lot of time in that community per se. And then the news then starts constantly depicting black people as a stereotype that is in essence negative. That's in essence what your brain starts wiring for, because your brain is all naturally biased to be sort of afraid of the unknown, but then the news ends up installing it for you by giving the stereotypes. And so I don't want to make excuses for anyone, but I'm just giving a scientific explanation as to how someone's brain can be wired through not even having overly racist parents, but just not growing up in a certain environment, not having a lot of interaction with people from other races. And then the news ends up and Hollywood ends up influencing us. That's in essence what's happening. Our brains are learners. That sets us apart from the animals. So that leads me to the mindset hack. Well, first of all, I just want to create an awareness that I do think that the media takes a huge amount of responsibility in influencing people who do not have a lot of exposure to other races or countries or political systems for that matter, that they don't know any different. I come from a socialist country. I hear people saying shit about socialists that I'm like, are you serious? That's not at all what socialism is, but there's just not enough time around socialists. Make sense? So what's the mindset hack then, right? The mindset hack is based on a study, and they have found that there's a huge amount of insight. One scientific study is to count in a week how much coverage you see of other ethnic groups. Yeah, and I want you to also then sort of make a note if this is positive or negative, right? And other than it being positive or negative or stereotypical depiction, I want you to also consider if news or images are shown about different groups interacting in positive ways, right? Or different groups interacting in negative ways. So that's one. And I want you to also count the amount of encounters, personal, you have with people from other races in your day-to-day life. And what that will reveal to you is if you don't have natural communication or exposure to people from other races, then there is a very likely possibility that your idea or your brain automatically fires based on what people told you, whether that is your parents, Facebook, or the news, right? And your brain starts to assume that that is really true and that is your reality. And I'm saying that from a pure scientific perspective rather than wrong or right. I'm telling you it's an installation inside the brain. Now, so if you feel that based on that little study, positive, negative depiction of people from other races, plus real life interaction, with mean a conversation, not just you scanning around how people are bad or good and compare. Now I'm talking about a real interaction, perspective sharing, engaging, connecting, having fun, getting to know each other, spending time together, exploring, things like that. How much that is, right? And then you'll start to get a real idea as to where does your positive or your negative bias really come from, and I think you'll get a better idea. Now let's just say that you notice that the odds are kind of stacked against you, which you could be at risk of being a little racist, and you may not want to admit that to someone. Then what's the mindset hack then here, right? Well, the mindset hack here is to really start becoming aware that you may need to filter out some news here. And that is the news that is stereotypical, of putting other races or cultures in a negative light, and alternatively other cultures in a positive light. You need to stop consuming that. You also need to understand that your brain currently is wired to be incorrect in reality testing. So that means that you need to hunt the good stuff. And that means, what I mean with that is finding ways to either consume positive news, positive journalism, positive interaction, with other racial groups, maybe watching things where races are joining together in positive activities or something like that, or to actually really go out into your community and learn, get to know, expose your brain, your neurology to other impulses, positive impulses, more reality tested impulses, and then you can allow your brain to change itself. If you have any power over people who report in the news, then you may want to tell them some of this science. Because if the news people have issues what's currently going on in the United States, then I hate to break it to them. In many ways, they are responsible. And that's all I like to say. That was the 9th mindset hack for today. See you tomorrow, 9 o'clock Pacific time, noon Miami, 6 p.m. in Amsterdam, and midnight on Bali. And those are NLP training destinations. I'm making part of the online class available for free. So stay tuned or drop a note below and I'll let you know.